All right, guys. Today I'm going to talk about fraud, about a trap, about a bad deal that almost happened. It's real estate. Whenever you're in real estate, there's always the risk of somebody wanting their easy money to defraud you. It's not just real estate, whatever business it is. There's always the scammers. And the tough thing is in real estate, especially for the new individuals, when you're so eager for that first deal or second deal, or you're eager for that great lender, and they're like, oh, just send us $500 and we can get you pre-approved. All those kind of like, it's so enticing, and there's so much built-in truth to these deals, but you don't know the red flags. So today I'm going to talk about one of these deals that came across my desk, and we almost got defrauded. And it was a pretty interesting one. It's been a couple years since I had one come over like this, so I thought this would be a great video and let you guys know all the red flags that you should really be looking for on deals. Now, this deal came across my desk by a wholesaler. He's a guy that we've done a couple deals with over the last few years, and I know he's pretty eager to get one. And he brings me a deal, and he wants to partner, maybe do a flip with us, or maybe co-wholesale, or maybe even, because it's a fourplex, figure out some way to make it an operating rental that we can both win on. And the numbers were enticing on it. $293,000 was the purchase price. They wanted 15,000 EMD, and the ARV on it was 450,000. The property was already operating, meaning that it had tenants in place. I actually even drove by this house, or this fourplex, to see if, let me see if it makes sense. Because with a fourplex, now when you're doing those rehabs, price per square foot numbers that I've talked about previously in videos, those are completely out the window, because a fourplex has 4 kitchens, 4 or 8 or 12 bathrooms. And those numbers all really compound. Each unit of a multifamily is a flip to itself. And typically, in most markets, you actually don't have to do full flips on these. You just do lipsticks, make them livable. And a lot of times, if you have a tenant in place, you're not even touching it because they're already paying rent. Why change it just so they can pay the same rent? And there's ways to increase rent, things like that. That's an entire different video. But I drove by this one. It looked like, okay, this thing looks solid. The wholesaler already had it under contract. And so I said, okay, well, send me the contract. Let's get involved and see what we can do, because they were asking for us to send the $15,000 EMD to title. And I'm like, okay, well, before I get involved with it and sending money just blindly, let me figure out what's happening. So he sent me over his contract, and it was just a standard 1-page contract, and it didn't cover half the stuff that needed to be covered. With multifamilies, you want to get your rent prorated, there's security deposits, you want to review the leases, a lot of different things like that I was like, okay, we need that, and the title company needs it too. Now, when I started talking more with the wholesaler about it, he's like, okay, well, the title is with this other company out in Tennessee. And I was like, well, hang on. That's no good right there. Why is it in Tennessee? I want it with my title company, or at least one of the Vegas local companies. It'll be so much easier, so much smoother for everybody, and frankly, it'll cost me less money, especially since I'll be paying the closing costs for both parties. The wholesaler told me that, well, I tried to do that, but it's the seller's niece who is at the title company, and he said it's a deal breaker, they got to go through her. And I was like, okay, well, let me talk to her, let me figure this out, and make the introduce me as your partner, and we'll go from there. So we did a conference call with me, the wholesaler, and the title girl, title escrow girl, and I believe Tennessee is a lawyer state as well, so there's more nuance to it. So I'm talking to her, and she seemed really new, and I was like, just what she's saying is like, it's, I've done hundreds and hundreds of deals. I've talked to escrow companies all over the U.S., and I'm like, she's just really new and doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. So I took over that conversation and said, okay, well, we're going to rewrite the contract, get you a new contract, because it's your uncle, but that way it's all spelled out there for the time frames and the EMD and the prorations. And she's like, okay, that's fine. Send it over, and we'll make sure he signs it. And I was like, okay, it's a family deal. So the family deals are always a little weird when you're dealing with multiple parties. But it was still one of those things where it's like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, is this thing real? Because we're in a super hot market, and it seems like they're selling for a pretty good tick below market. And it wasn't a lead that I sourced, so I don't really know. I'm just kind of stepping into it. So I'm talking with the wholesaler, and I'm like, hey Mike, where'd this lead come from? And he was pretty cagey about where it actually came from, and because he didn't really want to say, and I get that, because not everybody wants to share their marketing sources. That's not what I was going for. I was just looking for legitimacy, but I didn't press it hard with him. So instead, I wrote up a contract, one of my contracts, the ones that are in my in the Flipping Blueprint group page, and adjusted a little bit for the fourplex nature of the property, and sent it over to Mike. He sent it over to the sellers. They signed it that same day, and he sent it to the executed contract. I got it, escrow got it, and then escrow is like, okay, well, where's the EMD? And now that's a red flag. The escrow companies are supposed to facilitate receiving EMD. They're not supposed to pressure the buyer or seller to take those actions. They are a middleman. They're a neutral party. They just facilitate. Just because the contract says EMD to be delivered within, in my contract, I believe this one I had it as 3 business days, so it wasn't even due yet. And she's saying, hey, you guys need to send the EMD. I was like, wait, that's weird, right? Why is she telling me? Now remember, this is a family deal. She's the niece of the seller. So I go back to Mike and I'm like, hey, we've got time on this. Where are we at with getting into the property? Because we haven't even been in it yet. And now the story starts getting funky. The property manager, who is a nephew, who the names of the title girl and the name of the property manager, so the niece and nephew, completely different nationalities too, and they sounded completely different. And it's like, okay, how are these people related? It's nieces and nephews of the uncle, so you can split off different ways. It's also possible. Now, we're chasing a deal, right? So we want it to be real. So there's always that in the back of my mind, but that, okay, let me keep digging in, figuring out what's going on with this. So we're getting delayed on getting in, and we're getting pressure to send EMD. And it's, the guy's in Arizona, but he'll be here on Monday. But you guys have to send in your EMD before then. And it's just kind of funky. So I do a little more research on the title company. And the title company was, the name that we were given was Memphis Title and Funding, or something of that nature. And there's absolutely no record of a title company named that. Now there's a Memphis Title Company, but there's no Memphis Title and Funding. And it's like, okay, so it's close, and we've dealt with this before where there's different subsidiaries and different things. And title companies, they can have independent escrow officers and signers, or basically like a broker for a lender kind of thing, where they're out closing deals, but it goes, it's Joe Schmo Loans, and it goes to Wells Fargo at the end of the day. So things like that can happen. So it's all these little things, but they're starting to really build up. So I'm like, okay, Mike, send me the contact information for everybody. And now I'm looking, and everyone has a Gmail email. Now, the Gmail emails are, I'm just going to make them up, Sandra Davis 1974 at gmail.com and Trent Barkley 22445 at gmail.com. Now, those are just burner email addresses. Those are not real email addresses that people are using. And for these three different parties involved in this transaction on the seller side to all have that exact same style of email, it's like, whoa, that's a red flag. So now I can't find the title company. They're pressuring for the EMD. The emails are all funky. The wire instructions that we received did not have the fraud notice with them either. Now, the wire instructions were going to go to Bank of America, which is a reputable bank. But typically, title companies, when they say, hey, we need you to wire money, they have a very rigorous process on that now because of so much fraud on this kind of stuff. And they say, beware of fraud. There's something that comes along in the email or through the secured links that say, beware of fraud. So I'm like, okay, that didn't come with it either. And I started doing more research, and I actually enjoy this. This goes back to my appraisal days when I just dug into stuff. I'm like, and now I've already let the wholesaler know, hey, this thing's pretty fishy. Let me start running with this. You just stop communicating for right now. And he was very apologetic. I'm like, no, man, this is fun for me now. I'm having fun. Let's see what this really is. And at the end of the day, it still might be a deal because family deals, there's so much possible truth on this thing. I'm like, the only thing you need to do is, Mike, see if you can still get us into the properties. Keep going down that route. I'll handle everything else. If they mention anything else, just say Luke handles the paperwork, and he's the guy to talk to for that. So he keeps getting blown off of, oh, well, it might be, maybe this weekend, we can see if he can get out here on Saturday. He's in Phoenix now. And it was like, I asked Mike at this point, have you talked to the seller? And he said no, he had never even talked to the seller. Now, I've done plenty of deals where I never talked to the seller, but this is another red flag. I'm like, okay, so you never talked to the seller. Your conversations have only been with the niece and the nephew and this property manager. There's like two nephews and a niece, and they're all different names, all different things, and none of them match the seller's name. I'm like, okay, this is got to be fraud at this point, but I'm still digging. So I start researching the seller, and I'm like, okay, so I go to title records, the assessor records, the county records, the tax records, and say, where does this guy actually live? Because it's a fourplex, it's an investment property. I'm like, oh, okay, he lives at this address. Because there's a couple different frauds that could be going on right now. It could be just random people trying to collect EMD, or it could be family members trying to sell a property of a deceased relative. So there could be still really truth in that. Now, if they're trying to do that, there's ways I can still help them make that happen and I can get the property. But let's not be shady about it, because that's just bad news for everybody. So they could be scamming their uncle. Maybe he's still alive in a dementia house or something, you know. So I'm like, okay, let's figure out what scam this is, what's really going on. So I look in the tax records and I see, okay, he lives at 123 Any Street. I'm like, all right, let me see what's going on with that property. Let me mail him a letter, because in 3 days I can send him a letter and it'll say, hey, somebody's trying to sell me your house. I'm just trying to connect with you because we've never spoken. Here's my contact information. So I had that letter all ready to go, and then I took a look and I saw in the MLS that house had sold 2 months prior. So he didn't even live at that house anymore, the seller of this fourplex. So it's like, okay, now I got to keep digging. And I'm like, okay, well, hang on. That property just sold 2 months ago. Let me look in tax records in the recorder's office for the county and see what documentation there is that the seller may have signed. Because now I'm looking to match up signatures. Did the seller even sign this contract? And I find a document from the sale of that house, and sure enough, it does not match my contract. So this document from 2 months ago that was a closed sale with this same person, same name. It was a unique name where there was no chance of a duplicate on it. And it went back to connected by having the seller of this fourplex, his address showing as this. So I knew it was the same guy. So it had to be. The signatures were different, completely different. I'm like, okay, this guy definitely didn't sign it. Now, people sign for other people all the time. It happens. So it's still possible this thing is a deal. But it's just being handled very, very poorly on the other side, who is now still telling us, hey, you guys got to get the EMD in or this is canceled. But hang on. You didn't even read my contract to know that it's just Thursday morning. The EMD is not due until Friday. So why are you pressuring me to put the EMD in? Get us into the property. Let's take a look at that. Oh, and we'll get the EMD. We're just trying to figure out a couple things. So we're egging them on. We're kind of just keeping them on the hook too. And they said, hey, the seller has already wired their money to escrow. And we're like, what money did the seller send to escrow? And they're like, oh, it was the rent and security deposits. I'm like, wait, that's another red flag. Sellers don't do that. That comes out of the sale proceeds. If I'm selling a house that I have as a rental and I have a security deposit on it of $2,000, I don't send a wire to title so that they can have my security deposit of $2,000, so that when it closes, that they send me my $200,000. No, they don't send me $200,000. They send me $198,000, and that $2,000 is taken care of in the closing statements. And that's why it's important in your contract to deal with prorations and security deposits on any kind of investment property like this. So it was like, all right, nobody does that, but why did they tell me that the seller already wired money? Because they're still trying to get money from me. And it's like, oh, well, that person trusted me with their money. You guys should too. No, I'm too smart for you. I know what's going on. So like, at this point, this thing is just screaming fraud. And now the title girl isn't calling me with pressure now. I get a call from the nephew property manager, whatever he is. And I started talking to him. I'm like, okay, well, when can you get us in? And he goes, well, the guy's out of town. And I'm saying, oh, well, where does the seller actually live? And he's like, oh, well, he mostly lives in Memphis, but he still has a place here in Vegas. I actually did find another address, and I still mailed that letter out. I never got a call back on it. So people might, things happen. Don't know what was really happening with that name and address, but I never got a call on it. They could never get us into the property. And while I'm talking to this guy, I say, okay, at this point, I'm just going to call him out on it, because that's where the conversation was going. And I'm like, all right, let me just let you know, I've got some pretty serious red flags on this deal. That's why I haven't sent my $15,000 EMD across state lines. That's wire fraud. That's a federal offense. I mean, I didn't go into that, but that's what these guys are doing. If anybody's out there trying to do this stuff, these are big, nasty, bad crimes, and people go away for 10, 15, 20 years for this stuff. It's not worth it. And so I call the guy out on it. I'm like, listen, this is just funky. The niece, she's either really new, doesn't know what she's doing, but I couldn't find a record of her company. She might be an outside contractor. I don't know. But here's the deal. I'll wire money today to my title company here in town. We'll keep it moving. You get us in when you can, and we'll buy this thing. But the title company out there, I don't trust it. They're going to be slower, more expensive. So I'm still trying to sell this thing as just in case there's that still smidge back here that's telling me this could still be a deal. And I don't want to kill a deal if I don't have to. But I'm 99.9% confident this is a scam. And so I'm telling the guy this, and he's trying to make a couple excuses. And I ask him, well, so who actually signed the sales contract? Because I took a look at the property that sold 2 months ago, that your uncle sold 2 months ago, and I can tell you that signature does not match the one that's on our contract. And he's like, oh, really? That's news to me. I'll really have to look into that. Why the hell do you have to look into that? Why is that now oh my goodness, that transaction from 2 months ago? It's like, that's the thing you're worried about? I'm talking about all this other stuff, and I'm still trying to make a deal happen. And he's like, well, I'll have to get back to you on that. It's like, I don't care about that transaction from 2 months ago and what signature was on that. I wanted to know who actually signed my contract. And he said the seller did. I'm like, well, it doesn't match that one. And just real funky. Oh, and by the way, another red flag, that transaction from 2 months ago for the same seller happened within the MLS. It was a single family house. So again, it's one of those where there could be some truth and it could actually still be real, but it happened in the MLS and it happened with a local title company. So red flags all over this thing. So I called the guy out on it, and he's like, well, let me get back to you on it, and we'll see what's going on. And I'm like, okay, well, let me know, and let me know when we can get into the property. Click, done. Never heard from these guys again. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll just sit on it, because we do have a valid contract signed by somebody, so valid or not valid, but if it was really signed by the right person, it's valid. So I let a week and a half go by, and I'm like, you know what? Let me call and see if they did the right thing. Now, the right thing, fraud-wise, would be you get rid of all those emails and phone numbers because you got caught and somebody could be coming after you. I call, the girl picks up the phone, and now I'm calling from a different number, but still a Vegas number, and she is cagey as, and I'm like, hi, is this Memphis Title? Who's calling? Well, I'm looking for Memphis Title. Well, who are you looking for? I'm looking for Memphis Title. Is this Memphis Title? Well, who are you looking for? I'm like, who is this? I'm like, well, I'm looking for Memphis Title. If this isn't Memphis Title, then I must have the wrong number. And I hung up. I just wanted to see if the phone number was still valid. So she didn't know who I was calling. But that was, if there was a legitimate business or if she was attached to that business, give me the different phone number. Oh, by the way, I actually did call the Memphis Title Company, and they didn't know who she was. I contacted the property manager for the address associated with the company that she had and the address that she had. I don't think that one deserved air quotes, but and the property manager was like, no, there's no title companies here on this location. Well, I mean, there was like not a Chicago title, but one of the big names was across the street kind of thing. Like they give me real information. The property manager would know if they had a title company within their leasees. So all these red flags. So now what do? I never sent the $15,000, so in case you guys didn't catch that, we never sent any money. No money ever exchanged hands. But these people are shady as fuck. They're bad people. They're trying to scam honest investors like you. They're trying to take advantage of people, and I can tell you that every day there's people that get taken advantage for one way or another. And I can tell you that this information that I have has gone to the white collar crimes division. And whether they pursue it, I don't know, but it's off my plate, and we'll see what happens. But do your research. Don't get so enamored with a deal that you think it's, oh, this is a real deal. I mean, think about all the red flags that came up. Didn't really know where the lead came from. They contacted us, kind of thing. No contact with the seller. The title company didn't have, it was a Gmail address for a title company. The title company was pressuring the EMD. They wouldn't let us in. They kept delaying that. The multiple people involved, never spoke with the seller. Addresses didn't match up. Out of state title company. Let's see. The wire transfer didn't have the cautionary language with it. So many different red flags. And now some of these, you guys as new investors or even seasoned investors might not catch on all these. But you got to do some digging, you got to do some research. And whenever you can, use your title company, protect yourself. And if it's not your title company, make sure it's a title company that's a big name. Fidelity, Old Republic, Ticor, Stewart, there's regional ones that, make sure you know who it is. Don't just send any money to anyone. Never send any money. And I see posts all the time where people are operating in cash and doing quick claim deeds and things like that. That's the easiest way to get burned in this business. Everybody should have a bank account. Move your money that way. I don't handle cash. I rarely handle cash because, number one, it's dirty, but it's just like, I don't want to have to move around and meet people. I can make, with a phone call or a text message or an email, I can wire millions of dollars if I need to, whatever the case is, and make things happen. I don't have to do this weird stuff that these scammers try to do. So the main thing about this all is go after the deals, but understand what is a deal and pay attention to the signs, to the warning signs. Don't get so caught up like, I got to get this next deal. This has got to be real. Once you have to send money somewhere, it's your money. You work hard for your money. Your investors work hard for your money if you're sending their money. Protect yourself. There's plenty of deals out there. This one's dead. People might be going to prison, and avoid the traps. So, they're out there. Invest safely, do your research, and when in doubt, ask somebody for some help. It's okay. There's a lot of guys and gals out there like me that are willing to help, and we don't want to see people get burned. So, invest safely, guys.